Today on Locked On Red Wings, should Detroit draft Justin Carbonneau? We do a draft profile on him with Sean Shapiro of Elite Prospects and the Expected by Whom podcast.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. I'm your host, Brian Fisher. I'm a color commentator for Oakland University ACHA D1 men's hockey. Scotty got the day off, but I am joined by Sean Shapiro. Happy to have him back. He is a writer for Elite Prospects as well as the other half of the Expected by Whom podcast. We had Prashant on last week, Sean, so it's nice to have both halves of that coin on today. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good, man. It's not a bad day in June, and got a little bit less travel than I did last year because we just landed the beast of the draft guide, getting it done this week over at EP, and so we are. I'm much more relaxed, renewed person today than I was as of 48 hours ago when we were still in the final touches and. It's not the biggest draft event, but right, Memorial Cup goes until Sunday, and that was kind of it's not moving anyone up or down a board or anything like that, but it's the final data point before everything goes to press, and anyone who's gone and seen it, it's a behemoth of a project that I'm fortunate to work on with the team over there. So that's out. We're a little bit more relaxed. I get to go to my beer league game tonight with our pal Max Boltman, and I think Max is at the combine tonight. But I get to go to the beer league. I get to go to my beer league game tonight with a little less on my mind. So can't complain.
Yeah, that's great, and hopefully that'll allow you to get locked into those beer league games. Stop thinking. Don't let the mind wander too much when you're out there on the ice, because I know that you are between the pipes for those teams. I've seen it a couple times myself, and I was talking with a couple coworkers, Sean, about how perfect this timing worked on having you on because of obviously the EP guide coming out, but also all the smoke around Jason Robertson as well, because you cover the Dallas Stars as well as the Red Wings. You wear a lot of hats in the industry, so it's perfect timing. I'm excited to pick your brain about everything. Before we can get to any of that, though, I got to let the people know today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKDOWNNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Let's lead off this episode, Sean, talking about today's spotlight profile, and that is Justin Carbonneau. He is a forward, 6'1", 6'2", out of the QMJHL, plays for the Armada, 89 points, 62 games played, right shot, right wing. That's all the basic stats, that I'm looking at on Elite Prospects. It's everyone's go-to when it comes to these guys. What can you tell us about Justin Carbonneau? What stands out to you? What do you like?
Yeah, he's an interesting one because he was someone we had some pretty big debate about when we were talking about where he ended up on our draft board and where he went. And we ultimately had him at 11 is where he ended up in our ranking, but he's kind of one of those ultimate, if you just went on only the upside, right? Like only the upside, only pure potential. He's probably a top 5 talent in this draft. Like he's someone who, based off that upside. Now there's also questions about the decision making and some of the other things that if he had a little bit more of if some of that other base level decision making was a little bit higher up, it was at a James Hagen's level or something like that, he would be where James Hagen's is, in that top 5 pick area and everything like that. So ton of upside, real, not even raw, refined. Just he's got guy who's got all the tools. He's exciting to watch. I refer people back. Hattie, who I work with over at EP, did a really good film study that kind of went through and looked and broke down all the little parts of the game, how he works off of his skating, how he controls the space. One of the things that he does really well is he changes the point of attack. He changes the point of attack really well on both in transition, in the zone. He's able to kind of accelerate and decelerate, add ease around a defender. So a lot of like real fun potential with this kid. I think it's his skating is good. It's a guy who has real high boom potential. but the reason he's a little bit lower is because there's a little bit of bust potential because you're not sure, is he going to be able to do all of that consistently? It's like we had the shades of where we with all of our A-level prospects, we put the shades of in there, and when you see shades of Philip Forsberg, that gets exciting, right? But the reason it's only shades is because there's all those other things you have to do to make it happen on a night-to-night basis. You can't just be all the video game fun, sexy trends all stuffed into one, and you have to be able to do it consistently. So that's going to be a real interesting thing where he kind of goes with this. But good player, exciting player. If it's where the Red Wings go at 13, it's not a bad pick at all. It's a little bit of honestly, it's the type of pick that I would like to see Detroit take, just from the level of, I think this team has done, and I think Marco Kasper, Nate Danielson, guys who, I'm not here to rip on either of them, that's it, but there's been a lot of, those were higher floor picks, still at good ceilings, but you have Carbonneau's a lower ceiling, much higher floor type pick. And that's the type of pick that I think Detroit needs to start honestly looking at, because you need to start hitting on some guys like that, because you only need so many young versions of Andrew Kopp, right? So it's and I'm saying that about Nate Danielson more so than Marco Kasper. I think Marco's offense really this season kind of took that next step, and he's a little bit more, but just like from a Detroit perspective, I think this is the type of pick I'd like to see them go as you're trying to take some swings and figure out, can some of these high boom potential players boom, for lack of a better word here.
Yeah, I think you raise a really good point, too, and I don't think many Red Wings fans would disagree with you that Kasper, Danielson, even MBN are relatively safe picks, right? They're very touted for their two-way games. And I think a lot of fans, there was a subsect of fans that even last year, when did Cole Eiserman go? Was it last year or the year before that? Where there were fans that wanted them to start taking those swings on guys who had a huge boom potential, as you put it, but also had a lot of things to work on. And I think that you raise an interesting point about going after these guys who have the higher ceilings but might not pan out with where the team is positioned in their current rebuild. My other follow-up question to that would be, do you think right wing is necessarily a point of need for them right now? Obviously, you have your number one right wing in Lucas Raymond. Presumably, Patrick Kane's going to be coming back, but he's not going to be here forever. He's only going to be here for like a year or two max. He's already 36 years old, 37 years old. But do you think right wing is a spot of need, or are you team, like, if he's available, you just take whoever's best?
Yeah, now, one of my views on hockey, that is, I'm a big believer as we go further and further into positionless hockey, but that's my own just personal view of where the game is going. Like, I think going... and I definitely get some pushback and things like that. But if you're so much of the game now, and while there are tendencies and trends for players, so much of it now is no longer left wing, center, right wing. So much more of the game now is F1, F2, F3. It's who arrives first in the defensive zone, who's handling that. So is right wing a spot that is, do I care? Like, I like when players naturally play center a little bit more, because there's a little bit more versatility that makes them more comfortable, more all over the ice. But I think when it comes to drafting 18-year-olds, worrying about, especially when you're not drafting first overall, top 2, 3, I think when it comes to worrying about your current depth chart, when no matter who they draft at 13 is not going to be an NHLer for realistically 2-3 years, and if they are before that, you have a wonderful problem, right? Like, it's a great problem if that happens. So I don't think you worry about, we have Lucas Raymond here. Like, I think you go best player, and unless there's, and if the top, maybe there's a tie when it goes to positionality, but for me, you should be going best player available throughout the NHL draft, on what you believe in your board, until you get much later in the draft.
And for what it's worth, I agree with you, too. We're in an era now where positions are becoming more fluid. You see defensemen taking much bigger steps and roles into offense as well these days. And, you saw a little bit at the World Championship, right? Lucas Raymond traditionally has played right wing, but as soon as the Leafs were eliminated, Nylander came and played on that top line, Lucas Raymond shifted to the left side. You have to be flexible to make your rosters as best as possible. So, yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you on that point. I do have one more question regarding the draft position the Red Wings have, not necessarily on Justin Carbonneau. Yeah. And I'll ask you that in segment 2, and we'll get into the EP draft guide right after that. So stay tuned to segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. Got to talk to you guys today about Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. When you start using Monarch Money, you're going to realize how much you were spending on food delivery, subscriptions, and so much more, and now budgeting is smarter and safer than ever. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for 50% off your first year. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. I have Sean Shapiro with me of Elite Prospects and Expected by Whom. Also, again, many hats, covers the Stars and the Red Wings. But, Sean, I wanted to talk to you one last question, rather, about the draft, and not about necessarily Carbonneau, but the 13th overall pick in general. Because you were talking about how the Wings need to start taking swings with those picks. One of those swings that a lot of feedback we have been hearing about is just trading the pick outright. Like, if you had a choice between making a trade for using that pick as leverage to make a trade to get an impact player for this roster right now, or drafting a guy who with high upside like Carbonneau, right, who still might take a couple years, where are you at with where the Red Wings are?
Now, if it's the key question is what's the return for that 13th pick? That's always the
right.
The tip for the.
Well,
the
we might be talking about one of those returns later in this episode.
So if you are bringing in the impact player, I'm a believer in you take those swings, especially when you have gone and you've built out your prospect pool. I know we talked about some of those guys being safer ones, but that also means you do have a collection of future NHLers there in brandsegg-nygard and in Nate Danielson and kind of. So if you can use that pick to bring in an impact player, someone that will actually help you and move things along, I'm of the belief that you should do it. Because there's a certainty. And now there's always risk with every player and everything like that, but you have whether you take a Jake O'Brien or a Jackson Smith or whoever or obviously a Justin Carbonneau, whoever you take at that spot, right? They're an 18-year-old kid. They're an 18-year-old kid, and if you can go get a top 6 player, I'm assuming we're talking about a forward, you're going to go and use that first-round pick to get it. To me, that's what the Red Wings need to do, because it's an interesting kind of space with the team, right, too, where is the line on not rushing the timeline, because we all know Steve Yzerman has been very open about, I want to build a championship contender, not just a team that makes the playoffs. So, and that's fine. But if you're going to go trade the 13th overall pick in 2025 for a 25, 26, 27, even 27-year-old forward, whatever, and use that asset to bring that guy in, that probably helps your championship window. If you're say 2030 is the year that say Steve's got his secret board where 2030 is the parade route that he's already planned and everything like that. That still helps you. Like, you're still trading for an asset that helps with that window. So yeah, I'm on team. If you have the right option to move that pick and make that trade, do it. I think there's also there's an intrinsic value too, just from a draft perspective. I know everyone talks about the draft and trading it for a specific asset, but I'm also think there's, with this draft, with where Detroit is, there's a lot of guys, and you're doing all these draft profiles. You're probably coming across that, where after the first 7, 8, 9, there's a lot of guys who, if you got them at 13, you're happy, but if you also got them at 20, you're happy, right? And so I think there's also, from Detroit, there's a perspective of, is there value in moving in later into the first because someone else might have fallen in love with another player, and there's and then maybe you can pick up a couple other top 100 picks or something like that. I think all of that should be in play for the Wings.
Yeah, and I agree on that too. I mean, I believe this team is at a transitionary point in its rebuild, and it needs to start banking on players to help its young core that's here to take the step forward rather than take a pick that might not be here in 2 or 3 years. And I know I'm not alone, but again, yeah. I'm a podcast host. My voice doesn't mean a whole lot. And you said it yourself. Whatever Steve's magical board is what's going to be the determining factor. The EP guide that dropped today. Again, perfect timing on that. What can you tell the listeners about what's in store for them this year?
That is the one of the greatest passion projects in all of hockey for a group of people who obviously we're fortunate to do it as a job. But it is the light version is 500 something pages. That's the light version of the light version of the guide is 500 something pages. The full version, if you want every single game scouting report that our staff has done for years on these players, we've got that. And so it's a massive undertaking. I think we got the ranking all the way down to 170-ish, 175-ish, I think. And then more than 350 player profiles in there. And there's Mitch Brown is one of the best minds in hockey, and he's the person he's our director of scouting and really is the leader on that whole project. And I can't speak enough about how Mitch runs that, but between Mitch and Cam Robinson and David St. Louis and Hattie Kalachi and Lauren Kelly and just the amount of people that put so much work into that, it's impressive. And I get the privilege of, I get to see it early because I get to work on the editing part of it as it's going and everything like that. And it also gives the, for me, just from being a little bit on the inside of working on the guide throughout the season, seeing how it goes, to me, it gives me a lot more appreciation for what the teams themselves are doing, because when you're looking at building out what a player does and doing that, there's a lot of armchair analyzing that can easily happen. But how are you going to figure out what a player is? And how do you compare what the kid does in the SHL versus a kid playing MHL hockey in Russia versus what they do at the U18s? Like, it's a whole massive undertaking. And so for anyone, I'll give my pitch, my ad read is anyone who you should go to Elite Prospects website, buy the draft guide, become an EP premium member, whatever it is, and like it's such a great resource, and I'm proud to have worked on it, because there's like where we were talking about Carbonneau right now, and that's a player where we've got on his. I'm looking at his profile right now. We have not only do we have all of the data, we've got the data tracked on him for his games in the queue. We've got literally 5 pages of just in-game scouting reports in our full guide. So like if you want to go and see what he's looked like as a player in February and January, those are all the things you can get. And it's the type of thing for me where I was reading it before I ever worked with EP, but now it's you go to the draft and a guy gets picked, and you're instantly going right to look them up in the guide to double check to see how you did. So
I have like 5 or 6 questions to follow up with on that, but I'll fiddle it down to just like a couple for time's sake. One thing that stood out to me was the placement of Roger McQueen. This is a guy who I've heard, should be top 5, but he has had a lot of injury history. So when talking about his placement on these rankings, what has Roger McQueen in 5? Does the injury history not really play into it when we're talking about ceiling and floor? Like, what goes into those factors?
Yeah, one of the biggest debates we had about Roger McQueen was a fascinating debate, because we're talking about sample size and the injury and everything like that. And then we asked the very real question of ourselves of why you could say the same thing almost about Matthew Schaefer, right? Matthew Schaefer doesn't have the largest sample size. Matthew Schaefer we have him number 1 on our ranking, defenseman from Erie, and played one game at was it 1 or 2 games? Either way, but he gets hurt at World Junior, and he has not the same sample size. And so when it comes to McQueen, it's very much like the injury history is one thing. He's got some pretty unique skills with his size, but there's also a little bit more of the question of what is he going to be? Like we talked about Carbonneau as a high ceiling guy. Roger McQueen might be one of the highest ceiling guys, but sometimes we always get kind of caught up into this spot of like, what did it take for, and just use a current NHLer, like what did it take for Tage Thompson to become Tage Thompson, right? If you were to be like, people forget that he was drafted by the St. Louis Blues. It was eventually a trade away and everything like that. So McQueen is there. It's kind of one of those, there's less certainty with what he's going to be and where he's going to go. And I think that's kind of came into play, and you combine it with the injury history. And it was one of those where we had some wide variety here on where and who he was. I know it was a big debate for where to put him. And it's, I think teams are going to have, he's a classic example where if he goes 3 or 4, you're not going to be stunned because someone's going to like him that way. But obviously he goes 15 or 16, that also might happen too. He's got a huge variety in this draft class, and he's not a wild card's the wrong word, but just from who picks him could be. So
awesome. We're going to take another break, Sean. When we return, we're going to transition into Jason Robertson as, again, perfect timing. The guy who covers the Stars and the Red Wings comes on the Wings podcast to talk about a Dallas Star. Stay tuned to segment 3 of Locked on Red Wings. Segment 3, Locked on Red Wings podcast, joined by Sean Shapiro of Elite Prospects, as well as the Expected by Whom podcast. All right, Sean, when it comes to Jason Robertson, I was pretty shocked. I mean, I'm not locked on to the Dallas Stars situation like I am with the Wings, but I was shocked when I saw rumors start to circulate, Saravelli, Merrick, all saying Stars might be shopping Jason Robertson. I mean, this is a 25-year-old RFA. He has 1 year left on a almost $8 million deal per season, and he has had 3 straight years of 80-plus points, one of which having 109 points.
Yeah.
Why, first of all, are the rumors real in your opinion? And if so, why would they shop somebody with this much talent?
So I do think there's smoke to the fire that the Stars they're doing a heavy biopsy right now of how this season ended. One was, we know that the Stars are looking at what right now they're taking a look at their coaching staff right now. They're looking at what happened with Pete DeBoer in the Western Conference Final, and then there's been the dust out there that some players were disappointed with how Pete DeBoer handled things, and I wrote about this down at the magazine down in Dallas this week about how his lack of proper communication with Jake Ottinger after pulling him in Game 5 is definitely come back to hurt him. So everything's on the table for the Stars, because one of the biggest things that's with the Stars is they are in this spot, and it's like, it's kind of one of the funny things, because I obviously interact with a lot of Dallas fans, and I do the all DLS Stars show down there, and there's people who, there's 28 other franchises that would kill to have the problems Dallas has right now. Problems, right? Exactly. The problems of the problem of how do we get over winning 10 playoff games a year to get like, and they've done it, or they won 9 this year, but like how do you get over that hump? And the thing with the Stars is, when they've gotten to Edmonton this year, Edmonton last year, and Vegas 2 years ago, they have not offensively, this team that has become more skilled and everything like that hasn't found ways to do the dirty work, is a very poor way of saying it, but that's really what it is, where it's in the playoffs, and it's not that playoff hockey is, I think one of our biggest misconceptions is that playoff hockey is tougher and harder. What playoff hockey is familiarity. There's not enough time in the regular season for teams to worry about their opponent. How many times do you watch a coach's interview and he's like, oh, we worry about ourselves? Because that's really all you can do. 82 game regular season, if the Wings are playing the Ottawa Senators on Tuesday night, and they're playing the Carolina Hurricanes on Thursday, and they're playing the Nashville Predators on Saturday, Todd McClellan and his staff do a pre-scout for a bit, but really your biggest focus for all of those games is, what are the Red Wings doing? What are the Red Wings doing? What are the Red Wings doing? You aren't worried about, other than a note here or there, you're not worrying about other teams' tendencies. NHL coaches just worry about themselves during the regular season. You get to the playoffs, and all of a sudden it changes completely. There's nowhere to hide. Everyone knows what each teams are trying to do, how things are going. And so Jason Robertson becomes a predictable player in the playoffs because he's a lot of tendencies that he likes to, like, for example, on the Stars power play. He likes to work off the right half wall. There on the right half wall, he looks for the shot in the pass and everything like that. And if you take that away and you force him into a different option, he doesn't really do as much with it. Well, in the regular season, teams don't really worry about taking away Jason Robertson all the time. When it comes to, they don't worry about inflicting physicality the same way you do in the playoffs. And so Robertson has kind of proven that he, despite having some of those physical tools, he has not really found a way to present different varieties of attacks in his game throughout a 7-game series. And so that's kind of what we've seen. Now, this year, this year's hard to judge properly too, just because honestly he was hurt most of the, he came into this season, he had the growth on his foot they had to take off surgically before the start of the season, so he had a slow start to the season, and then he got injured in game 82 and he missed the whole first round. So there was definitely some challenges that he came through. But if you're Dallas and you already just signed Mikko Rantanen to the big 8-year deal after you signed that, you've got Wyatt Johnston signed, you've got Rope Hintz signed, and Jason Robertson has put up the regular season numbers that are going to demand big monies in RFA. It's not that Jason Robertson, the player, I think Jim Nill wants to be available. It's more so Jason Robertson, the cap hit, and the space of what that represents is more important. Because if you're the Stars, can you become that more difficult to play, quote unquote, difficult to play playoff team if you were able to use that cap space in another spot? Would you be able to make some other investments if you didn't have to have? I mean, we all saw the whole thing with Yzerman in Detroit, right? Where it was like, well, they can't, like, and I think it was used as too much of an excuse, but the whole thing, they can't do anything because he's got to wait for Raymond and Seider. Well, other teams just go and tend to just do things and then figure it out. But that's that's something where Dallas is going to be in a little bit of a spot that with Robertson of how does that work? And so if he is traded, and Jim Nill is a very pragmatic person, and he looks at things in step A leads to step B. So I have a hard time believing. I don't think the Robertson rumors are false, but I also have a hard time believing that they are a simple dump Jason Robertson play. I think it has to be part of something larger, and it's one of the things that, like let's look at the Rantanen deal, for example, when the Stars traded for Rantanen at the trade deadline. That's something that kind of, there was places that were going all around where if going into this season, Logan Stankoven, like Jim Nill told me directly about a month before the trade deadline, Logan Stankoven is not available, right? He's like, Logan Stankoven is just part of our future. He's not going anywhere. Okay. Well, it changes all of a sudden when you can trade for the guy who has this trade for that guy. So
right.
It's so if the Stars are moving Jason Robertson, it doesn't necessarily mean the return has to be the Jason Robertson replacement, but it might be the move that they're opening up for the cap space for the Jason Robertson replacement. So, which brings up the other natural thing where in Detroit, and obviously, because I think we'll try, like, if Detroit, you might be trying to trade for Jason Robertson, and if I'm any team, you know what, I would love to add Jason Robertson to my team. If you're Dallas and you think that you can sell Mitch Marner on a nice spot to come in and all of a sudden in play with Mikko Rantanen, now that might have no idea how you make the money work, but you'd have to move Jason Robertson's money to make that work. If Dallas is trying to make that next big swing, Robertson might have to be the guy moved for that reason. So that's a long-winded answer, but
it's perfect. And you know, the Detroit situation too, right? Like that's why I wanted to bring it up, because there was the report from Merrick today that they may be looking for draft capital in return. I'm like, finally, a situation where that kind of makes sense for Detroit. They have draft capital to spare. Like, I give you 2 firsts just to start the negotiations. I'm not Steve Yzerman, thank God I'm not. But that's how desperate I am as a fan. I'm like, because when we've talked on the podcast here about Marco Rossi and JJ Peterka, but those are teams that want like actual NHL players back in return. And I'm like, they're going to be asking for Casper, and I'm not willing to give Casper for either of those two guys. If they're looking for draft capital, I'm like, I feel like this makes so much sense because they need a top line winger who can score a lot of goals. And so if you're Yzerman and he's on the block and they're accepting calls, like, you got to pick up the phone, right?
100%. That's 100%. Not only, and you don't tie everything into where a guy's from and everything like that, but Jason Robertson skates at Orchard Lake St. Mary every single summer. Like, that's where he skates all summer. Like, he lives in Northville. He skates at Orchard Lake St. Mary every summer. Him and Nick do that together. So he's a guy who, I know he's from quote unquote from California, but he basically made this area home already. So this is a perfect, like, if you're looking at a geographic tie-in, that's not a bad setup. It works pretty well. So yeah, it's if you're in Detroit, it's like you said, would you trade number 13? Yeah, I mean, Dallas was willing to trade 3 first-round picks to get Mikko Rantanen. Or sorry, 2 first-round picks to get Mikko Rantanen and 2 thirds and another 4th. If the Stars are making this move, they will be looking to replenish some of that capital they lost in the Rantanen deal. And if you are Detroit, realistically, tell me, if you're going to be drafting 13th this year, hopefully you're drafting 22, 23, 24, hopefully next year. Mm-hmm. You really think you're going to get a player more impactful for your quote-unquote Stanley Cup window than Jason Robertson with those 2 firsts? I would have a hard time believing you.
Well, and Scotty and I talk about it all the time. I'm sure you've seen Family Guy at some point in your life, right? It could be anything. It could even be
the boat. It could
even be Jason Robertson.
It could be the boat.
Yeah. You can either have Robertson or you can have the 13th overall pick that might become like Robertson. It's like, I'd rather take Robertson, especially because he's a guy who's 25 years old. Like, he's right in his prime. I mean, for me, it made so much sense that, of course, I had to bring it up.
But it's fair. It's fair. It's the whole, like, and it's one of those where if you are Detroit, you do come in with a spot of, I know there's not a lot of, like, you're not going to trade Casper, that you're not going to trade there, but you also have a prospect pool that is at least, when you go to Dallas to make your offer, like, obviously your picks are a big part of that, but Dallas's prospect pool is horrible right now. And part of that's because of graduations. Liam Bichel has graduated up to the NHL. You had Maverick Bourque is now in the NHL. So part of that is graduations, but the Stars have they need those BC level prospects, because it's funny where it's like, because I was at the playoff game between Texas and Grand Rapids, and it was a perfect example where people forget what success in the AHL actually means as far as prospect development goes. Like, you're watching Grand Rapids play, there's probably more players on that Griffins team that will become impact NHLers than there are in Texas. There's definitely some quad A bottom 6 guys on that Texas team, and that's how you win more in the AHL. I think people always get those two things kind of confused. You win with the guys like that. And so Texas but the Stars could really, really need some of those poker chips on some of those B-level guys that honestly Detroit probably should move on from, just to save them from themselves on right now, because there's a lot of guys that Detroit will never find out if they work or don't because of some of the other moves they made way above them in the depth chart.
Sell high on those players when there's still the idea they might be NHLers.
Well, perfect example is sell high before they turn in. Here's the greatest kind of example of how this all evolves, right? Is Joe Veleno, you get at 30, right? Mm-hmm. And you're like, man, he's going to be... Now, he dropped for a reason, and we saw his NHL play is the reason he probably dropped. But you see, you're like, oh, this guy's a first-round pick. He does all of that, and granted, he's their second first-round pick of that draft. But years later, all you have left of Joe Veleno is you've brought in another goalie to make the Sebastian Cossa situation more confusing. That's
don't even get me started, Sean.
Yes.
But yes. Absolutely. So, Sean, I really appreciate you coming on today. This was a fantastic conversations that we had on today's episode. Why don't you plug your stuff? Let people know the thousands of places where they can find you and read you and listen to you.
Yeah, big one right now is obviously I got the hat on for a reason. Go to Elite Prospects, check them out, get the draft guides up. We got a bunch of stuff coming there this week. There's a really good story on James Higgins that dropped today that I edited, written by Cam Robinson. I've got my own site that I run through the Substack platform called Chap Shots Hockey. Go check that out. Got a couple things coming through that, and then shout out to the folks over at the All City Network as well. But yeah, big one right now, and it's the reason I'm wearing the hat is there's so many people who put so much work into that draft guide, and it comes out, and go check it out. You'll be a smarter hockey fan reading it. They do so much work, and it's really impressive the amount of time and man hour and energy put into that, because it's a massive undertaking. So check that out. That's my big sell.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Sean. We will have you back on, I'm sure, as we approach the draft of 26th this year, right? Given the teams a little bit more time between the draft and the free agency, unlike last year where it went bang, 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 and I know a lot of GMs were not very happy about that. Yep. So, again, thanks. We'll be back tomorrow, probably a full episode on Jason Robertson, because you got to capitalize, strike when the iron's hot on those rumors. So stay tuned for that. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.